Hey, hi, welcome to Ron Time. uh, it's March. Madness continues. The U of A is rated number one, or something like that, maybe number five. And won the Pac 12, where there's 10 teams, and they used to play in the Pac 10, where there were 12 teams. And for a dyslexic like me, that's kind of confusing, but that's okay. I was on my way to Procrastinators Anonymous, but I was so late, I figured I'd stop in and make my TV show first. So it's run time. I think we're number 24, 2 dozen, something like that. Anyway, some events take place every March. My oldest brother David was born March 9th. He was the architect in my firm before he passed away 10 years ago. And pretty special guy, real smart, real fun. Always used to say, "Hey, buddy." So, hey, Bubba. Another thing that happens every March is equinox. And I like to always go to some of my favorite buildings that I've built and just look at the corner and watch the shadow and, make sure that my work continues to be appropriate for a sun-centered life. And after all, that is what we live right here in Tucson, Arizona, the home of domestic animal abuse every February with the longest non-mechanized parade in the United States. Interestingly enough, this year there was an entry with a Ford Mustang on a wagon pulled by two horses. And I don't know if that was a two-horse Mustang or just a pulling contest. But once again, opportunity for people to rope wrestle and hang around with smelly domestic fly breeding, methane farting cows and bulls and horses, and woohoo! It's a big deal, I guess. Uh, anyway, the thing that's interesting is that it's a holiday for our school kids, and state legislature is considering taking that holiday away and making it a regular school day so that these kids can pass all the new school standards and tests that they have to take under Governor Dookie Duke, because he wants them all to grow up and be franchisees. Speaking of Dookie Duke, I made a joke, a reference last time to you could get a Cold Stone franchise for cannabis distribution. And I don't know if I stomped on somebody's trademark or patented name, but it seemed like a joke to me, so I told it anyway. I've done that in other places and gotten a lot of trouble for it. In fact, I did a scratch and sniff joke the other night that almost got me killed by an angry member of an angry person in a biker bar of all places, for someone to get offended by an off-color joke. Anyhow, you never can tell when they're joking or when they're serious. So I figure as long as I'm talking to you, I'm pretty serious. And I might be a funny guy, but I talk about serious stuff. And I continue to write the president and the president's wife and the president's press secretary and the president's scheduler and the president's personal assistant and John McCain and Nancy Pelosi, encouraging them to have cannabis declassified by the DEA so that we can get on with the medical studies that were attempted years ago but blocked by the Drug Administration because they didn't want to admit that there were any positive factors to the product called cannabis. So as a result, they put quash orders on publishing any of the studies and gag orders on the doctors that performed them in medical colleges around the world. And ever since, women in America, as well as women in other countries, have had to suffer horrible archaic treatments for breast cancer, when in fact cannabinoid oils injected into the bloodstream will attack breast cancer cells without collateral damage and without all the expense and hassle of invasive surgery or radiation bombardment or the other ways that chemotherapy that we treat breast cancer. And if I were a woman, I'd probably get my hooters up in a roar about that, because the DEA has failed to tell the truth ever since the Nixon administration. The same administration, by the way, that promised to pay $3 billion to Vietnam for dumping Agent Orange in massive quantities and causing dioxin-related diseases for decades and decades. The grandchildren of Vietnam veterans who were exposed to Agent Orange are showing unusually statistically high cases of cancer, birth defects, and other abnormalities that are directly related to dioxin. Now, you'll remember that dioxin was outlawed in the United States to save our national symbol, the bald eagle, because the dioxins were weakening the eggshells to the point that they could not survive the full incubation period, and the population was becoming decimated by this problem. And so when DDT with its dioxin base was removed from American shelves, as Roundup should be, then you see that things changed, and the American bald eagle made a return to the wild in large numbers again. And so what we have to do is take a look back in history at where dioxin came from, and it's actually an invention of the Germans before the Second World War, when they were working on poisonous gases and toxic weapons. So those chemicals applied to your fields where your foods are grown are creating the same kind of long-term genetic problems manufactured by American companies now that managed somehow to sneak out of Germany with technology and patents and come to work in the United States making products for farms to protect us from bugs and stuff. Well, it turns out they're killing off the honeybee, and one of the most important key factors in agricultural success is successful pollination. And if you're going to kill off the pollinators, you're going to kill off successful agribusiness in the United States. So it's time to take a serious look at everything that came out of dioxin and everything that's related to dioxin and everything that's related to Agent Orange, and step forward and make sure that the people of the United States don't have to suffer the kind of damages that the people of Vietnam experienced because we use so much Agent Orange there. And that the long-term residue and the long-term effects are just beginning to show in large populations, including the grandchildren of American veterans exposed to Agent Orange. So it seems like it's always going to be a battle to protect our sacred and unique little planet from corporations and governments who don't give a goddamn about anybody that they hurt in the process of their making money or becoming powerful. And it appears more and more that the federal government of the United States uses its largesse, its purchasing power, and its multiple layers of secrecy to continue to refuse to reclassify cannabis as a non-narcotic. And I guess since it's Ron time, then that gives me permission to gripe and bitch and moan about it all I want to, because I'm on public access television and I'm given the constitutional privilege of free speech. So I do not take this privilege lightly. I take it as a responsibility. And when I pointed out to the mayor, Mr. Rothschild, that the current cannabis policies of the city of Tucson still end up with the arrest and incarceration of incredible numbers of people on an annual basis at a huge cost in both social and personal capital, and that it feeds into a system of incarceration for profit that never, ever should exist. I mean, this is 21st century slavery. 4 out of 5 people incarcerated in the United States are persons of color. The United States represents 5% of the world's population, and yet it houses 25% of the world's incarcerated souls. In the land of democracy, the home of the free, the place where we almost killed off our national symbol for profit for a chemical company. So, ever since the Nixon administration, the DEA has grown to be a very powerful, very large organization with more undercover agents than any other agency under federal control. And they're not all above ground. There have been many cases where DEA agents went south, so to speak, and started dealing drugs themselves, or stole money, or stole drugs, or stole airplanes, or did all kinds of things. How about the time that the DEA was flying kilos of heroin into Marana Air Park in the body bags of American soldiers returning from Vietnam, because they figured if they brought a kilo per body bag back from the Golden Triangle, that pure heroin on the American market would make the CIA and the DEA two of the richest black agencies who didn't have to go to Congress for any budgetary requests, because they knew how to bankroll things on their own. And they quite often involved, I don't want to say mafia, but, underground sources and underground assistance. I mean, the fact that this thing went on undiscovered long enough that it went all the way up the chain of command to Barry Goldwater, who was a general in the Air Force, who backed off of it because he didn't want to lose his retirement nor his stripes. Seems to me that it started at pretty high levels and it went at pretty high levels, and it looks to me like it's still operating at pretty high levels, because today there is no accurate statistic that tells us what the efficiency or the effective rate of contraband, of stopping contraband, and how that compares to the rate of incarceration of human beings in the United States of America. That when you look at the number of people incarcerated for non-violent drug offenses, because they're in for-profit prisons where the states who mandated them and permitted them actually have to pay if they are not 90% occupied. So, of course, the judges, the justice system, the courts, and the prosecutors are going to try to get as many people incarcerated as possible so that they can get matching federal grants. And so they can have 90% occupancy, so it doesn't come out of Arizona taxpayers' wallets like it did during Jan Brewer's time in office. In 20 2013, $10 million of Arizona taxpayer money went into the pockets of for-profit prison corporations because they weren't 90% occupied. And the state, through an agreement with her office, made up the difference. So, everyone you know knows someone who has been incarcerated at some point in their life. And at this point, in the black community and the Mexican American community, the ethnically darker colored human beings in the United States are 4 out of 5 prisoners. They're 80% of the money in the justice system is spent on those people, incarcerating them, prosecuting them for possession of cannabis, for possession to sell, for distribution, blah, blah, blah. There's even human beings in the United States of America who are serving life sentences for possession of a non-narcotic. Because in 1937, a white supremacist racist named Harry Anslinger told the Congress of the United States in a closed hearing that darkies who smoke reefer think they're good enough to dance with white women. And that's why cannabis is a class 1 narcotic, and that's why America, at 5% of the world's population, has 25% of the world's prisoners. And the fact that this is the anniversary of Selma, Alabama, where the civil rights of American human beings were trampled by law enforcement who believed that God was on their side in preventing black people from exercising their right to register and vote. Well, guess what, Selma? There are 5.5 million cannabis criminals in America who can't vote because they were arrested for a narcotic classified a class 1 by the DEA. 5.5 million people cannot participate in democracy because they smoked a plant that grows on every nation in every continent except Antarctica. The fact that it is on all continents is rare enough in plant species, but secondarily, it sequesters more carbon than any other species of plant on Earth, and therefore ought to be on all continents as a carbon sequestering device, as a medical device, as a social and pathological comforting device, as something which evolved before democracy for a purpose on this earth. And if you people who run this democracy would tell the truth about this one species, you could begin to open a process of telling the truth about all species, including the truth about all human species, that we all have the equal right to the pursuit of happiness, to life and liberty in the United States, and that as a beacon of democracy and a leader in the world, to take a leadership position legalizing hemp and cannabis for large-scale production to change the atmosphere forever, to stop putting carbon into the atmosphere by burning fossil fuels and replace them with plant-based, non-fossil fuels. hemp oil will burn in a diesel engine with nothing but a simple filter. And hemp oil can be produced in large quantities with a simple double helix screw extractor that's very common for making oils. And hemp oil makes stronger plastic than fossil fuels. Hemp oil does not contain the heavy metals and the other poisons and toxins that exist in fossil fuels. And ever since the invention of fracking to fracture rock to release gas and oil, now you're dealing with the consequences of shoving dioxins and benzene, of all chemicals, into the wells to make the flow faster. And that's another addition that is putting more methane and more carbon into the atmosphere than is necessary, than is safe, and that may in fact not be reversible. We don't know that. But if large-scale production of hemp and cannabis around the world were put into place and practiced, there would be no need to drill, baby, drill for fossil fuels. You would find that you're working with agribusiness and farmers and families instead of oil companies who don't want to pay their fair share when they screw up, who don't want to pay fines when they cause pollution, who don't want to be responsible for the toxins that are released in places like the rainforest. And now, BP doesn't want to be held responsible for all of the damages that were caused by their well blowout that released the largest record outflow of crude oil into the ocean ever recorded in the Gulf of Mexico, one of the most important fisheries on earth. And you want these people to hold your future in their hands? I hope not. Now, the smartest companies are going to sustainable business models, to sustainable practices, to environmentally intelligent buildings, to energy conservative automobiles and trucks for their fleets, to compressed natural gas power driving your beer to the market. Do you understand? The smart companies are already moving beyond the idiots. So the fossil fuel industry is going to be left like a stepchild in the dust when true competition emerges, because hemp and cannabis are going to be declassified and allowed to be grown in all 50 states because the federal government is finally going to tell the truth. And I certainly hope that they have the wisdom of South Africa and the business mind of Germany and the fortitude of South Korea. And if they learn from the leadership of those places, then they'll probably learn from the leadership of Jamaica, the first nation on earth to take all criminal cases away from cannabis. There is nothing illegal about cannabis in Jamaica. Grow it, smoke it, trade it, sell it, buy it, do what you want. They will no longer prosecute you for that in Jamaica. And if the United States had half a brain, that's where we would be moving today. As we move towards relationship with Cuba, it's time to re-examine the Caribbean for wisdom. Thank you for your time. See you again on Ron Time. Have a nice day.